this is my review of that time I got reincarnated as a slime. Okay, so this episode actually starts off by introducing us to a familiar character that we already know, but is apparently established to be an antagonist in this episode. Somebody we knew that apparently betrayed Rimuru. And we actually do find out who this person is, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. You'll figure out who it is in a couple of minutes. But this episode also discusses what Rimuru plans to do regarding the Western Holy Church. And also him forming alliances with the Kingdom of Thalion and a couple of other things. So it starts off with Laplace. He's going to explore a sacred temple on top of a mountain. And he is chased off by a vampire which he expresses confusion about. And the vampire does chase him off, pointing out that the mountain is a sacred place guarded by the Holy Lord Luminous. Which we do find out later is this dude's name, but he chases him off. He does chase Laplace off, and Laplace goes running back to his master. And that's where things get interesting. So Laplace does return, but not to Clayman. So he returns to somebody else. He actually returns to Yuki. So as it turns out, yeah, Yuki's a bad guy. Apparently he's been manipulating things behind the scenes and is apparently involved with Clayman and the Western Holy Church and their involvement and the Harlequin Alliance as well. Apparently he's just been pulling the strings from behind the scenes and has just been controlling everything. But in case Laplace does return, pointing out how the danger he was nearly in back to Yuki, and Yuki points out that that's unfortunate that he wasn't able to fully investigate the church as well as he could have. But since he did do what he said, he decides to honor his end of the bargain, and reveal that he actually is reviving the president of the Harlequin Alliance, Kazarim, who apparently died at some point, and Yuki decided to revive by putting their soul into a homunculus. And when Laplace is over the moon finding out that his president is alive, he wonders whether or not where he is and what's actually happened to him, and if he can see him, only for it to be revealed that Kazarim was in the room the entire time and is actually in the body of Yuki's secretary, I guess. Yuki revived the Kazarim in a elf body, which Laplace can't help but make fun of a little bit, pointing out that that is very unbecoming of him. But Kazarim merely points out that yes, she knows it's not the body she's normally used to, but also points out that Laplace should show a little more gratitude that his master is alive and well. So Laplace apologizes, at which point they then proceed to discuss things. So it does start off with Kazarim pointing out Yuki's involvement regarding Rimuru and how he's caught up in one of Yuki's schemes. And I'm not gonna deny that Yuki very much is pulling things behind the strings. He's very obviously trying to manipulate Rimuru and several other nations into fighting one another. That's very much a thing he's trying to do. But at which point, after realizing that Laplace and Yuki are kind of old buds, after realizing that Kazarim and Yuki are old buds, and are just kind of comfortable with talking with one another, and since Kazarim is also calling Yuki boss, Laplace decides to fall in line as well and point out that he's going to call Yuki boss as well, and states that, and then proceeds to tell everybody what happened. He actually was sent to investigate the Western Holy Church. He went to the main temple, but couldn't find anything shady hiding behind the scenes. Which is why he was at the mountain and was subsequently attacked by Luminous. So he fled. And Kazarim tells Laplace that he was indeed very wise to do that because as has been established throughout this episode, Kazurim, because Kazurim is in a homunculus body, isn't fully able to isn't at their full strength yet. And also points out that Kazurim has actually fought with Luminous in the past, and points out that it's very dangerous, that it was very dangerous for Laplace to be caught in the crossfire of him, and points out that Laplace did a very smart thing by choosing to flee. And Luminous, and she does continue to point out that Luminous is a very dangerous person, and also points out that it's very odd that he's actually helping work with the Western Holy Church, pointing out that he's the kind of person who only sees people as food. So it's very strange. So it's very strange for him to be working with something that's supposed to be protecting people. He doesn't normally do that. So which does strike her as odd. And Laplace does confirm this, pointing out that obviously a vampire shouldn't be in the Western Holy Church, and that if there is one there, that should be a very odd thing and something that needs to be looked into more. But eventually Laplace does get a brilliant idea, pointing out that Luminous is confirmed to be a Demon Lord. So obviously, if they want to investigate the temple of the Western Holy Church, all they need to do is find a way to actually lure Luminous out of the temple where he resides, so that they can safely explore it. And then points out that they should host a Wall Purges banquet, which is effectively a meeting of Demon Lords, which Kazurim does confirm used to be just 7 of them. Pointing out that they can easily host a Wall Purges banquet, because Clayman, in addition to himself and the Harlequin Alliance, even though he technically doesn't count as a Demon Lord as we've established, in addition to him, he also has Freya and Milim and a couple of other Demon Lords in his pocket, so they could easily hold a Wall Purges banquet to lure Luminous out of the church, so that they can actually investigate. And Kazurim praises Laplace, pointing out that's something very brilliant for him to say and point out. And Laplace is very much proud of himself, pointing out that he's kind of matured a bit since they've last seen each other. And then he also wonders out loud what Rimuru will actually do with this going forward. And although he calls him the squishy thing, so which is kind of funny that this evil Demon Lord person just calls him the squishy thing. But in any case, it then cuts to the main bulk of the episode where Rimuru is actually preparing to host a meeting between all of the people that have arrived at his doorstep. Obviously, Yalm is there as the future king of Falmouth and all of his associates. The 3 Beastketeers who are all there. Obviously, Gazelle Dwargo and his men are there. Fuse is there as well, and Elude, who just recently arrived, they're all there. And after Shuna introduces everybody and formally introduces everybody during the meeting, they then proceed to get started on the meeting. But then Rimuru wonders out loud where Veldora is, and she remarks that he's changing. Sure enough, he shows up in a button-down polo shirt, which Shuna then remarks does look good on him, and he is very proud of his new outfit. So yeah, he's very proud of the very formal outfit he was asked to wear, and says it does look good on him. But when Gazelle Dwargo does kind of point out that he hasn't seen this guy before and wonders who he is, Rimuru then proceeds to point out that it's actually Veldora, which causes everybody's jaw to drop to the floor, and Fuse even passes out for most of the episode. There's even a little gag where when he shows up, when we finally check back in with him, he's got a warm washcloth over his head and is still recovering from the shock he just had. But yeah, Fuse actually faints when he finds out that Veldora is standing right in front of him. And obviously Veldora doesn't help matters by loudly boasting that he is indeed Veldora Tempest, and even also kind of pointing out that Rimuru is kind of being a bit cold to him, since Rimuru very much wants him to not get heavily involved in the meeting, since he could very easily cause things to go badly, by virtue of him just being Veldora, just being very flamboyant and being very overall being a very flamboyant and gung-ho person, he can very easily cause problems for the meeting, and just wants him out of the way. Like it doesn't really, like, Rimuru doesn't really matter as long as he behaves himself. But Rimuru is, but in any case, after that little comical exchange that ends with the Veldora putting Rimuru in a headlock, Gazelle Dorgo and Elalud very much want to meet with Rimuru in private to discuss what they just learned. And the meeting is effectively called off before it even started. At which point they go into Rimuru's main hall, which is revealed to be in front of the gazebo where they decided to hold the meeting. They meet in the gazebo at the back, behind the main building, main office where Rimuru and all of his followers gather. But in any case, Gazelle Dwargo and Elalud do cut to the chase. They want to know how Veldora got free and why. So Rimuru decides to just tell them his life story up to this point, because he hasn't told either of them yet. He explains how he died, reincarnated as a slime, how he met Veldora, and then catches them up to the present day. And they're both kind of a little bit upset, pointing out that this new information is kind of a little bit hard to stomach. But they also point out that is also a little bit problematic, because in addition to being a demon lord, Rimuru has also made friends with a dragon, and not just the dragon, the evil dragon, as we find out in this episode. He was very much sealed away because people deemed him as evil. And the fact that he's now have successfully returned is of great concern to both the nation of Phalion and the nation of Drogon. So obviously they're a little upset about what's going on. But Rimuru does point out that he was indeed planning to tell everybody anyway, pointing out that Veldora just existing in the city of Tempest was actually part of his plan to actually keep everybody in line. And Gazelle Dorgo does point out that it is indeed a good plan. Point out that he'd be more than happy to side with Tempest when the time came, since as he points out, most of the Western nations would actually fall in line if they found out Veldora was back. So obviously they're not going to attack. So, and his entire point is that nobody's going to be stupid enough to attack a town that is run by both a demon lord and a dragon. Obviously, nobody is that stupid. So, but in any case, Rimuru is very thankful of the fact that Gazelle Dorgo was actually planning to side with him and knew he would from the beginning. But then proceeds to ask Elalud what his deal is, pointing out that he literally just met Elalud and Elalud would have no reason to trust Rimuru, let alone form an alliance with him. And Elalud points out that the reason he's there is because Erin, for all intents and purposes, she created a demon lord. Long story short, she was the one who gave Rimuru the idea, and Rimuru was ultimately the one who decided to go with that idea and wipe out the entire army of the entire army of Falmouth. And he does point out that because of that, as her father and as the vice leader of Valiant, he does point out that he does need to take responsibility for that. But he also points out that he was always there on diplomacy of friendship, though he did plan to call in an army if things went south. But he does ultimately decide to befriend Rimuru, and does decide to actually form diplomatic relations with him, which Rimuru is very happy of. And with that, the entire Western nation has actually sided with Rimuru, although, as Gazelle Dorgo points out, everybody except the Western Holy Church, which he points out is going to be very difficult, and for reasons that we actually do find out in a bit. But he does point out that obviously the Western Holy Church is going to be a problem, and Elalud even confirms this, reiterating the point that Rimuru killed 20,000 people. Let's just be perfectly honest. Rimuru straight up slaughtered 20,000 people that were sent to a demon lord, and granted he had good reason to do that, but still, the fact of the matter is he's a mass murderer. He killed a lot of people. But as Gazelle Dorgo pointed out, all of their bodies have since disappeared, so there's no evidence of the army ever being wiped out. Which means that Gazelle Dorgo and Elalud can actually change the story as they see fit to make Rimuru look more pleasant than he actually is. And they do discuss the finer points of of that before deciding to reconvene the meeting. Obviously, Veldora, obviously, as I've established, fused. He passed out from finding out Veldora is Veldora, and just kind of had it passed out and is only now recovering. And he doesn't even chew out Rimuru a little bit when he comes back, pointing out that he needs more advance notice on stuff like that next time. But in case, after reconvening with the meeting, they do proceed to get to the discussion of the Western Holy Church, and to start with that, Rimuru decides to tell them about his fight with Hinata Sakaguchi. And everybody is thrown for a loop because as we find out, both refused and later confirmed by literally everybody else in the gazebo, because Hinata Sakaguchi isn't the type of person to just randomly attack people out of the blue and try to wipe people off the face of the earth. She's not that kind of person. She's usually the kind of person to uphold the law and view people in high regard. So the fact of the matter, the fact that she decided to attack Rimuru and try and kill him is a little odd and a little bit out of character for her. But they also do point out that there's likely a connection with that it's likely is a result of the Western Holy Church, pointing out that Luminous is actually because of Luminous, obviously, but the Western Holy Church adheres to the teachings of Luminous, which is to say they don't view monsters in the highest regard, and likely never will. They don't really. Basically, long story short, their teachings regard that they are not allowed to form relations with monsters. They're not allowed to be friends with monsters. They're not allowed to do anything with monsters. They're not allowed to trust the words of monsters. And as I said, very problematic. And Rimuru even confirms this, pointing out that obviously because of that, she's not going. Talking to Hinata directly isn't going to actually solve anything, and even if he did, the Western Holy Church likely wouldn't accept him anyway, regardless of what he actually does. So he does point out that trying to negotiate with the Western Holy Church is probably a lost cause. But at which point Diablo and Shion actually volunteer individually to go and fight Hinata, and kind of deal with the problem outright. But Rimuru stops them and also scolds Veldora, pointing out that he clearly wanted to be a part of that argument as well. But Veldora backed down when he saw Rimuru chewing people's heads off. So he decided not to and just went back to his manga. At which point Rimuru does point out that they actually can't go after Hinata or the Western Holy Church because, as they point out, they actually need to treat them with respect and actually do need to keep an eye on them. So just to make sure that they don't try and attack Tempest again. Obviously they've done so before and have declared that they're planning to in the future, but Rimuru just points out that they need to just keep a close eye on the Western Holy Church and make sure nothing bad happens. And also he does bring up the point that the Western Holy Church seems to have brought several otherworlders in, and also points out that Hinata will also seem, based on the description that the rest of the leaders there gave, she isn't the kind of person to oversee that either. But as we do find out, apparently being an otherworlder is kept hush hush. It's apparently forbidden in the Western nations, and very few people are actually made aware of its public knowledge. It's outlawed, but so people actually do use summoning to summon another worlder. They keep it hidden. They don't tell anybody that what they did. But in case, after discussing all of that, Rimuru then proceeds to get ready to disband the meeting, and gets ready to move on to other important tasks. Before he does that, he starts thinking over the possibilities of who could actually have sold him out to Hinata, pointing out that obviously she knew that he was Japanese and killed Shizu, but as he quickly points out, there aren't very many people who know that information. As he points out, not very many people are aware that Rimuru killed Shizu and is an otherworlder. So obviously somebody had to have given her that information when she came to attack him. And after deliberating with Raphael, Rimuru does eventually come to the conclusion that Yuki was the one who sold him out. pointing out that it makes perfect sense for him to do that, since he could easily get Hinata in a position where he can investigate the Holy Church. He could successfully wipe out one or the other, since they're both enemies of his. He could easily deceive the Western Holy Church in deciding with him, and Raphael eventually concludes that he likely did all of the above. But in case Rimuru decides that he'll deal with Yuki later and try to figure out what his motive is, and then proceeds to continue with the meeting, and continue to figure out what the future of Tempest should actually be. But as he's about to do that, Ramiris actually shows up, bonks her head on the roof of the gazebo, which is kind of a full glass ceiling. But she literally hits the glass ceiling of the gazebo, and after calming herself down and recovering, she then proceeds to tell Rimuru that she heard the news regarding Tempest, and that the nation is likely doomed, which everybody begins to panic at, which is interesting. And considering that the next episode is called Ramiris' Warning, because I'm reviewing this a little bit later than I should be, because I had a scheduling hiccup when I moved into my new room. So this episode does play an interesting role, that Ramiris is going to show up and explain what's going to happen to the nation of Tempest if they're not careful. But in any case, this episode does establish a couple of things. One, that Yuki is indeed a bad guy and is indeed working with Clayman and several other Demon Lords to try and take down Rimuru. But more to the point, it also establishes that Yuki is also trying to do something with the Western Holy Church and trying to investigate it. And also that Rimuru has diplomatic relations with everybody except the Western Holy Church. He's firmly established to have established relationships with all of the Western nations except for the Church. So eventually he is going to have to cross that bridge when he comes to it. But considering the Church doesn't really like monsters all that much, he's probably going to have a bit of a rough go of it. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to discuss when that happens. But for right now, that's my review of that time I get reincarnated as a slime. What did you guys think? Let's get discussing in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on with the channel, then Twitter's the best way to do that. Also, be sure to check out my Patreon and help support me if you want to. It's only a couple bucks a month, and it does help me make future projects for you guys. So if you guys do want to go check that out, by all means, go ahead. If you guys want to support me even further, be sure to check out my Twitch. I stream every Sunday, 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. So if you guys want to go see that, by all means, go ahead. The link is down in the description. You can also search it by going to twitch.tv/ZackMarstosTwitch. Either way, is an acceptable way to do that. But by all means, go ahead and check that out if you don't want to miss a stream. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So, if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But, regardless of whether or not you do any of those things, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!